I'll be honest, I was quite critical and confused by the deadline move by the Dallas Mavericks to trade away Kristaps Porzingis and acquire Spencer Dinwiddie and Davis Bertans. But ultimately, I look pretty silly for that. That's why I'm just an NBA YouTuber who makes occasionally mediocre takes, and why Nico Harrison is the general manager and president of basketball operations for the Dallas Mavericks. So here's my video giving credit to the front office of the Dallas Mavericks and how they have built an NBA title contender. If you're talking about the roster construction success of the Dallas Mavericks, you have to start with the selection of Luka Doncic, the core centerpiece of this Dallas Mavericks roster. Sure, you could say that picking Luka Doncic at pick 3 in the 2018 NBA draft was the simple, right, correct pick, but ultimately they didn't just have the number 3 overall pick and he didn't just fall in their lap. They traded up to get the number 3 pick to acquire Luka Doncic. They sought after him. It wasn't just that Luka fell in their lap. They actively sought to acquire him and did so, trading away their 5th overall pick in that year's draft alongside another first-round pick that turned into Trae Young and Cam Reddish for Luka Doncic. And it was certainly a win-win move for both teams at the time, and it still is now. But the brilliance of Luka Doncic is certainly the defining factor between these Mavericks teams being a competitive roster and a team that otherwise without him would be a lottery team, assuming that it's not Trae in his place and it's just no one. But there are a lot less obvious and lesser known front office decisions that have been very important to the construction of this roster. A lot of moves that have been made under the radar, and a lot of talent that has been acquired that has been outside of the draft, or that has been outside of the lottery of the draft. Jalen Brunson was a great draft selection. He was, in fact, in the same draft class as Luka Doncic, but was the 33rd overall pick in that draft. 30 picks later from Luka Doncic, and he has been an amazing draft selection. He has improved year in, year out, has become a regular starter for this team over the course of the season since Luka missed time early. He averaged over 20 points per game in that stretch, kept this team alive, and kept them competitive in that stretch, as Luka has mentioned on JJ Redick's podcast. He was a big part of keeping them afloat while he was out, and without him, they would be nowhere near as good of a team. He is still even on the year, averaging 16 plus a night, and it sure is a bit unclear whether he will be a member of the Dallas Mavericks past this season, as he is going to be a restricted free agent. But with that being said, an amazing selection at 33rd overall to get the player, the quality of Jalen Brunson, and has been a very valuable part of this team over the last few years, and is going to be a very valuable part of this team as the backcourt mate to Luka heading into the playoffs. Recently paid Dorian Finney-Smith has been a great starting wing for this Dallas Mavericks team after being signed as an undrafted free agent. He has been a great pickup as a 3-and-D wing, and if he was told to me as a lottery pick, I wouldn't be surprised. He's good enough to be a lottery pick as a fine 3-and-D starting wing. Dorian Finney-Smith is an absolutely brilliant show of work of player development and scouting from this Dallas Mavericks group, as he has been a very important piece of what they've done over the last few years and is going to continue to be, as he has now signed a 4-year, $55 million extension, which honestly I think is an absolutely brilliant value deal. Undrafted free agent gets his money, but is also on a fairly valuable contract for the Dallas Mavericks moving forward. He's key to what they do from a spacing standpoint on offense, shoots well from deep and gives good spacing to Luka, but is also very key to this defense that is much improved this year as well. Starting center Dwight Powell was acquired via a trade in December of 2014, which was only a few months into his rookie season, which was a deal that involved Rajon Rondo also heading to the Mavericks. And although Rondo didn't really pan out, he was the main part of the trade, but Dwight Powell's arguably had the much bigger impact on the Mavericks, as he now is their starting center and has remained an important part of this roster over the last 8 seasons. Maxi Kleber has also had time as a starting big or as an important rotational big man for the Mavericks over the last few years, currently primarily off of the bench, and has been a member of the Mavericks for over the last 5 years, again after being signed as an undrafted free agent. This is multiple rotational pieces that aren't just undrafted free agents that the Mavericks have, but are players that the Mavericks signed as undrafted free agents that have only been members of their organization, that they found via their good scouting team, that they found via their good front office and have developed well over the course of the last few years. It's clear the Mavericks scouting staff have done a great job at identifying young talent via the draft. Undrafted free agents, acquiring young players, such as Dwight Powell at a young age, undrafted free agents. But the front office has also done a great job at acquiring key contributors via trade and key depth pieces via under-the-radar free agency signings. Tim Hardaway Jr. was considered a throw-in, a bad contract included in the Kristaps Porzingis trade. But instead, he became more valuable to the Dallas Mavericks than Kristaps Porzingis has, in many ways. Of course, he is unfortunately injured for the Dallas Mavericks and will not be playing in their contention run this coming postseason, but he's been a solid floor spacer and scorer alongside Luka or as the sixth man for the last 3.5 years. He's played some of the best basketball of his career in Dallas and has become a solid secondary scorer for this group, and hopefully will be able to get back to health next year and continue to do so if he stays around long term. Reggie Bullock has been a great addition for this group via 2021 free agency. After having a very good year with the Knicks, he did have a bit of a slow start in Dallas, but he's found his way, he's found his shooting rhythm, he's found his defensive intensity, and he's kind of that Dorian Finney-Smith guy off the bench where he isn't quite as long and isn't necessarily getting power forward minutes, but he is that really good 3-and-D guy. He has good spacing ability. He's very good on the defensive end with good defensive intensity and fairly good lateral quicks. Good addition to have. Shooting as well as he was last year in New York? No, but his numbers were absurdly good in New York last year. They probably weren't going to get replicated. Very good signing by the Dallas Mavericks. Sterling Brown has been another good depth addition from 2021 free agency, who is not necessarily a lock in the rotation night in, night out, but it's a very nice depth piece to have. Someone who can provide, again, some good defense, a little bit of spacing, but he isn't the best three-point shooter. But he does have experience on a Bucks team that has had some runs in the playoffs, and he has some playoff game experience under his belt. So this is a good, although young, experienced player who can provide some good defense for you when needed. And the same can be said for Frank Ntilikina, who was a very under-the-radar signing. People didn't really recognize that he moved or where he went. And again, he has not been a rotational lock, but he provides some good defense for them off of the bench. He's got a few years of NBA experience under his belt, and his three-point shooting hasn't been terrible at times this year and can provide a little bit of spacing in that form as well. But we have to get to the Spencer Dinwiddie trade. Certainly, you can look back at the Kristaps Porzingis trade and say that that was now a mistake. And sure, it wasn't a great era of Dallas Mavericks basketball. Kristaps Porzingis was not the co-star that was needed around Luka. Luka needs the ball in his hands. That's where he's best. He's a playmaker. He's also a scorer. When they have an offense that Luka can have the ball and the other guys can play off of him instead of having someone else on the court who needs their touches and they need to give touches to, such as was the situation with Kristaps Porzingis, then that's not ideal. But now they've got a scenario where they have guys who can create their own offense in Jalen Brunson and Spencer Dinwiddie, but don't necessarily need their touches, don't need post touches, don't need to have ISOs. They can do it if Luka needs a break, and if Luka's on the bench, or if there's favorable matchups, but it isn't we have to get Kristaps Porzingis 18 to 20 shots tonight. It's a much more free-flowing offense with Spencer Dinwiddie and Jalen Brunson around him. Not to mention, Spencer Dinwiddie has played the best basketball of his life with the Dallas Mavericks. Now, is it going to continue at this rate? I have my doubts, but I'd love to see him do it. He looks way, way more comfortable than he did in Washington. Even his explosiveness just looks the best it has since his injury. He is shooting by far the best efficiency he has from the field, and especially from three of his career. He's been brilliant. He's been absolutely brilliant. He has shown that he still has the ability to blow past players and finish at the rim. He's shooting over 40% from deep on over 5 attempts, which is absolutely absurd efficiency, especially for someone like Spencer Dinwiddie, who throughout his career has been more known as someone who gets to the rim and attacks the rim compared to his three-point shooting ability. Now, Davis Bertans still hasn't been great. He's shooting even worse from deep than he was in Washington, and he's probably still a bad contract. But Spencer Dinwiddie, I'd argue, has been playing better right now than Kristaps Porzingis has pretty much ever played in Dallas. And even if he isn't, he's a much better fit alongside Luka than Kristaps was. It's not always about having better talent on your team. When you have a player like Luka, You need to have the players that fit around him better, not necessarily have the most amount of talent around him. The ability of the Dallas Mavericks to acquire talent via undrafted free agents, late draft picks, and under the radar free agency signings, alongside the acquisition of the 3rd overall pick in 2018 and Sir Luka Doncic, has been key reasons to why the Dallas Mavericks are now putting themselves in a situation where they are legit NBA title contenders.